Welcome to Noob-Splaining. My name is Wolf. If this is your first time here, then this is where I explain the crazy, over-the-top world of Warhammer 40,000 that nerds like me love so much. So, settle in, grab a drink, and prepare for a Noob-Splaining session. Welcome to this week's video that has essentially, for all purposes, basically become a combat patrol box review. And this week I'm going to look at my favourite chapter of Space Marines, the Dark Angels. So, as always, a brief look at their in-game lore, what's in the combat patrol box, how to use them, and what I would suggest you add next. So, long before the Horus Heresy, the Dark Angels were not just any old legion, they were the Legion, the first created by Emperor Chris himself, and, naturally, he spoiled them absolutely rotten with equipment. It is alleged they were present and involved in the culling of the Thunder Warriors after the final battle of the Unification Wars of Terror. The Astartes were given the nickname of the Emperor's Angels, and it is from this nickname, along with their black armour, that they derive their name, the Dark Angels. As they were the first legion that were created, they had the honour of creating all the combat doctrines that all the Space Marine legions would use. Some of those legions would then build on those to create a very unique combat style ideally suited to them. For example, the Space Wolves prefer shock assault tactics but can also work in standard battle lines. Now, prior to the Horus Heresy, the Dark Angels were considered one of the most powerful and possibly the largest legion, and the discovery of their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, on Caliban allowed them to refine and improve those combat doctrines even further. It was at this point the Legion then rebased itself from Terra to Caliban and built a Space Marine home base called a Fortress Monastery, which they named the Rock. Now, the Lion is not only a tactical genius, he is by far the best duelist of all the Primarchs and arguably one of the powerfulest in combat, second only to Layman Russ of the Space Wolves, in my opinion anyway. Now right now I'm sure there's a whole bunch of Sanguinius fans screaming heresy and grabbing their pitchforks, and if you think Sanguinius is the most powerful of Primarchs, well, I'm sorry, but you can fuck off. The Dark Angels, however, are somewhat arrogant, as it was they that created all the initial combat doctrines and then refined them when they found their Primarch. As a result, they saw themselves as better than all the other legions and even refused to learn from them. This earned them the nickname of the Uncrowned Princess from the other legions, but this was never said to their face. Now, prior to the Horus Heresy, they were by far possibly the biggest and most powerful legion, and especially with all the toys Emperor Chris had spoiled them with. This was the main reason that when it became apparent that the Xenos race known as the Rangdan needed to be obliterated, it was the Dark Angels and the Lion that were sent to do the job. Although they succeeded, the loss in their numbers they would never fully recover due to the start of the Horus Heresy, and so, at this point, Guilliman's Ultramarines became the largest legion. During the Horus Heresy, the Lion discovered that several of his senior staff, including his number 2 Luther, had failed him, so he banished them back to Caliban, where their job was to induct and train new Space Marine reinforcements and send them out to him. This caused those that were banished back to Caliban to become resentful, which led to a large portion of them betraying the Lion and the Imperium and falling to chaos, so they stopped sending reinforcements. When the Lion returned to Caliban to find out where the fuck his troops are, the orbital defences opened fire on him. Needless to say, this pissed him off a lot, and the resulting battle left the Lion seriously injured, and it also destroyed pretty much the entire planet of Caliban, leaving only a large chunk that just happens to have the Rock on it and all its many vaults underneath it. Pretty fucking handy that. So the Dark Angels strapped some shield generators to it, some engines, covered it in weapons, and now use it as a mobile fortress. Being the proud first legion they are, they have kept the secret of these fallen angels hidden for around 10,000 years and hunted them down and killed them wherever possible. Now, as I said, the Lion, who was seriously injured, decided he needed to sleep it off. Well, it must have been a very fucking serious injury, as he was asleep for 10,000 years. But now he's back and forgiving the fallen angels that are still loyal, which the other Dark Angels absolutely hate and resent having to fight alongside these fallen. After the Heresy, when the legions were broken into chapters, the Dark Angels kept a few unique things that stand out. Their first company, the Deathwing, only wear Terminator plate and paint it bone white, whereas other chapters' first companies do also wear power armour. Also, the second company, the Raven Wing, are always mounted on fast attack vehicles like land speeders or bikes. In pretty much every other second company, it is a standard battle line company, meaning it has a combination of tactical, assault and devastator marines. The members of the Raven Wing have also retained their original black armour from pre-heresy days, but the rest of the chapter now paints their armour in dark green, in homage of the forests of Caliban that are no more. So, let's have a look at what's in the combat patrol box. On this one, you get the following: a Primaris Chaplain, 5 Intercessors led by a Sergeant, 3 Inceptors, and a Redemptor Dreadnought. Now the first thing I want to point out here is that every single one of those models is found in the generic Space Marines Codex and not the Dark Angel supplement. In fact, all the themed Space Marine box sets have generic Marines and upgrade sprues rather than the unique units of those chapters. So to make them into Dark Angels, like I said, you also get a couple of Dark Angel upgrade sprues and some Dark Angels transfers. This allows you to change some shoulder pads and a few other cosmetic bits. But if you don't use those upgrades, you can use what's in the box as any chapter of Space Marines at all. In all honesty, I think the only reason Games Workshop does such a big range of Space Marine combat patrols is so they can keep an eye on which ones are selling and which chapters are the most popular. Anyway, like the Ultramarines box set from last week, well, generic Space Marines but they're meant to be Ultramarines, I don't think this one is again particularly well balanced either, and it's also a pretty poor choice of models. Anyway, let's talk about what's in it and what you should do with it. So, the Primaris Chaplain. Now, just like all Space Marine characters, you want to get this guy into melee combat as soon as possible. His Absolver bolt pistol, while better than a normal bolt pistol, only has 1 attack at strength 5, but in melee he has 5 attacks at strength 6. Also, if he's leading a unit, that unit gets to add 1 to its wound rolls in melee, but there's no other dedicated melee units in the box, so I have no idea why the chaplain was added instead of a captain, or a lieutenant, or maybe even a Primaris librarian. Overall, the chaplain is one of the weaker characters. The 5 Intercessors. Not much to say here. They're your standard range unit, great at killing standard infantry, but will start to struggle against anything tougher. With there being 5 of them, one of them gets to add an underslung grenade launcher to their bolt rifles. So, the new bolt rifles are caseless, armour-piercing, high-explosive rounds with an over and under grenade launcher. Isn't that the M41A pulse rifle? Anyway, now, those upgrade sprues mean you can give the sergeant a power sword, and he gets to keep his bolter. Although a ranged unit, those Marines can go toe-to-toe in melee with pretty much any other infantry, and could probably even gang up on a single, quite powerful character. Now this is the thing with Space Marines, they are really good at everything. If you tie other armies' ranged units up in melee, they usually get their heads kicked in, but Space Marines can do as much damage, sometimes more, in melee than they can at range. Ironically enough, these particular Marines get more attacks in melee than they do at range, but the ranged attacks are slightly better as they give -1 to the saving throw. However, that Sergeant's power sword makes him an absolute bit of a beast in melee, so move them up while shooting, and if you get the chance, charge an enemy, but avoid being charged yourself. Generally, the charging unit is the one that usually comes out on top. The Inceptors. Now, as you can see, they are armed with dual bolters and jetpacks, so they're meant to zip around the battlefield, laying fire down on the enemy. Those twin weapons are no slouches either, each having 3 attacks, and have a lot of keywords on them, specifically assault, pistol, sustained hits 2, and twin linked. Meaning that if they make an advanced move, they can still shoot. They can still shoot even if they're engagement range of melee. They get 2 extra hits for every 6 rolled to hit, and you can re-roll any wound rolls. So with 9 attacks, plus any extra attacks you get from rolling 6s at 2 damage each, they're really good at mowing down heavier infantry and most characters. So far we have a nice little force. Now, this is the bit that unbalances it. The Redemptor Dreadnought. This thing is fucking insane, and on its own can mow down the contents of most combat patrol boxes. It comes equipped with twin Fragstorm grenade launchers, which can be replaced with a twin Storm bolter, a heavy flamer that can be replaced with an Onslaught Gatling cannon, a heavy Onslaught Gatling cannon that can be replaced with a macro plasma incinerator, a Redemptor fist, and can also be equipped with an Icarus rocket pod. So, which of those options should you take? Personally, I would swap the flamer for the Gatling cannon and the heavy Gatling cannon for the plasma gun. Also, put those Icarus rocket pods on it. Now remember, it's a vehicle, so it can fire all of its weapons every turn. So you use the Gatling cannons to put lots of small holes in weak infantry, and the plasma cannon to put lots of big holes in heavy infantry, vehicles and characters. And if anything gets too close, punch its fucking face off with that Redemptor fist. 5 attacks and a massive strength 12 and 3 damage each. With a 2+ save, a toughness of 10 and 12 wounds, very little is going to hurt this big hulking bastard. And to top it off, each attack assigned to it has its damage reduced by 1. So you're going to need to hit it with some big guns or powerful melee attacks that do more than 1 damage. So, most models out of a combat patrol box are fucked, as they can't even hurt this thing. The only thing about it is, although it's the usual high quality model you get from Games Workshop, I personally fucking hate it. It reminds me of that fat Autobot Hound that John Goodman voiced. Now give me one of the old box Norse any day, or a Contemptor Dreadnought over this thing. So, would I get this combat patrol box? Absolutely fucking not. You're only getting 10 models, and one of them I fucking hate. Now, I can understand some people will want to grab it, as that Dreadnought is stupidly overpowered for a combat patrol scenario, and it can pretty much deal with pretty much everything in any other combat patrol box. Personally, I would rather get the generic Space Marine one with all the Terminators in it. Now, what would I add? Well, some dedicated melee units like Assault Intercessors for the Captain to lead would be a good idea, more standard Intercessors, or maybe heavy Intercessors to bring some more firepower, and maybe some Terminators for, again, more firepower and survivability. The Dreadnought can handle most vehicles and characters, but some more heavy weapons wouldn't go amiss. Definitely need a stronger leader in there, so throw a Captain in the mix. Or if you're going to use them as Dark Angels, then definitely go and get the Lion himself, as there's not a lot in the entire game he can't go toe to toe with and not totally fucking butcher in a single round. Plus you want a Land Raider, as Land Raiders are fucking cool. Overall, I think this is the worst value for money of all the combat patrol boxes. It's also a massive missed opportunity to do either a Deathwing or a Ravenwing themed box set, and quite frankly just really crap compared to the contents of any of the other Space Marine combat patrols. Frankly, skip this one and buy any of the others instead. Out of all the combat patrol boxes, I do hate this one and think it's the worst one out there, which is a shame as I fucking love the Dark Angels, and any long-time viewer of my channel knows I like to bang on about how good these fucking combat patrol boxes are. Except this piece of shit. And there we have it. That brings us to the end of this week's video. If you made it this far, thank you very much, and if you laughed or learned anything, please consider hitting that subscribe and like button. Also, don't forget to share this video with somebody who could do some Noob-Splaining in their life. Please leave a comment. I do try and interact with every comment I get, but most importantly, thank you, and I'll see you next time.